I appreciate y'all having me out.
Thank you for
The
coming.
invitation. Absolutely. I appreciate being able to come. My name is Kaleb Sims. I am from Groesbeck. That's in Limestone County, just east of Waco. And my family moved there back in 1980. My dad and uncle started a small business there in '81. And I grew up, graduated from Groesbeck, went to school at Texas A&M. Did a victory lap there at Texas A&M, graduated in 2000. And I worked there in College Station for a few more years. All in all, I was in College Station for about 10 years. Worked for a technology company, met the woman of my dreams, got her educated. She's a physician assistant now. And we moved back to my hometown, back to Groesbeck. And we are raising our children there. I've got 2 girls, 5 and 3. And I've got a little boy that is coming in May. And so we're excited about that. When we moved to Groesbeck back in 2008, we had big plans. We were going to settle in and kind of get established, and then we were going to buy some land out, build us a house, and get out to the country. This last February, so I guess it's been about a year ago, we finally, after all those years of hunting, we found us a place and bought it, and started working on plans on building a house. And then what happened between February then and November is what brings me here today. Like most of you, or all of you most likely, 2010 was a year of hope. Chet Edwards had been voting for the Democrats for far too long, and we were looking to get somebody new in. We had some good candidates were known. We had a few candidates were unknown. Bill Flores won that, and he went to D.C. on a very conservative ticket. But his performance in D.C. is consistently conservative on votes that really don't go anywhere. But then there were some very important votes that did go somewhere where he was not so conservative, and that's what I was watching. 2014, so don't get confused from this last omnibus bill, but the one before that, they were calling it the omnibus bill. And a whole lot of things in that not to like, one of which is we need to do our budget the correct way, and we haven't done that since Obama's been in office. And Republicans taking over the House didn't change that. But 2014, December, they're coming down to a vote on it. And actually, I started calling his office, Flores' office, just to ask, hey, what's Congressman doing on this? And got nothing, which if you've ever called his office on a key vote, usually you get, he's still looking at it, waiting to hear from his constituents, anything but he's going to do this or he's going to do that. So took to Twitter, and he posted on Twitter, he said, hey, I'm looking for feedback from constituents on what you think I should do. Man, I'd like to see bury this thing. Let's get a new budget in. And of course, you don't get many responses on that. I didn't expect one. There's a lot of people he has to answer to. But what I did was I was watching all of it. We don't usually watch all of it. It's kind of like watching grass grow or paint dry. And there was a procedural vote. And during that procedural vote, the conservatives on the right and really the liberals on the left had gotten together to go against the establishment and kill this thing. And they had the votes. It was actually dead in the water. In the middle of the vote, Boehner calls a recess. And they come back from recess, and 4 guys flip their votes from no to yes, and it passes. The difference is 1 vote. 1 vote going from yes to no, and the thing fails, we get a new budget. My guy, the guy I voted for it. And so I was disappointed. I actually took to Twitter. I pointed out to him on Twitter. I said, hey, you could have made the difference here. You voting for this thing in the final, or voting against it in the final vote doesn't make up the fact that you saved it at the procedural level. And his answer to me was block. He blocked me on Twitter, so there went that. Apparently accountability is not favored. So just taking it all in stride. Next thing I was paying attention to was John Boehner being up for speaker again. Called his office, what's Mr. Flores doing on this? The office is like, we don't know. I said, well, I'd like to see him vote for anybody not named John Boehner. And he voted for John Boehner. And so I realized that whatever my voice was carried no weight. Fast forward on to the summer. Anybody know, when I say Trans-Pacific Partnership, does that mean anything to y'all? A few of you? Was a highly secretive deal that Obama worked out. He's been working on it since he got into office. Trade partnership with many Pacific Rim countries. When I say highly secretive, like there's secretive legislation that often goes on, but you have aides that have security clearances and they can go read that legislation and look at it. Well, in this, Obama had tagged it so that only the members themselves could go read it. And so you really don't know anything about it. There were a few things that came out on WikiLeaks, but you're kind of like, is this trustworthy, is it not? Knowing how Obama is on large legislation, I just didn't trust it. And anyway, the vote was coming up to give Obama trade promotion authority on this bill. And once again, I called Flores' office and I said, what's he doing? He's waiting to hear more from his constituents. Well, I'm a constituent and I would like to see him vote this down. And he voted for giving Obama trade promotion authority. And I told my wife, I said, I don't know if I should watch how he votes anymore. It's kind of tough on the heartburn. And so the next thing that happened is I got a letter that says, Bill Flores is coming to Groesbeck for a town hall meeting. Now I was kind of naive. I showed up, I had like 6 questions written out. If you've ever been to a Bill Flores town hall meeting, what it is they allocate an hour. He talks for 50 minutes. And then 50. And then you got about 10 minutes left where a few people can ask some questions. And typical to political town hall meetings, the first couple of questions are pretty softball. They're probably staged, but it happens all the time. You can't expect that. What happened next I thought was golden because he said, we're out of time, but if you have questions, I'll stay here and answer questions as long as you have questions. And I'm like, great, because I got lots of them. And so my first question that I found, it took a while for me to get it, but I finally got to ask a question. And my first question was on the Trade Promotion Authority. And I said, Obama just negotiated this Iran deal. Gave away everything, got absolutely nothing. And then he's got this highly secretive bill that nobody can read. 1, have you read it? And 2, how do you justify voting to give Obama a trade promotion? And he said, when we voted trade promotion authority, we had this list of X number of things that he has to meet to make this go through. And it's going to be a good conservative bill. It's going to be great for America and great for small business. And he gave all these things how great it's going to be. And then and he said, and he had read an earlier version of the bill. Okay. And then he moved on to ask how many people thought Obama did a terrible job on the Iran deal, which was unanimous. But it left some things unsaid, and one is that if you read an earlier version of any legislation, what you're voting on is not the same thing. what came out later when they released the legislation is that it was 5,554 pages long. And Bill Flores would have had to read it all himself because his aides would not be able to go read it for him. You know, and I thought he deflected that pretty well, kind of skated right through it, and so I thought, you know, if I'm going to ask my next question, I'm going to have to be a little more pointed so that he actually gives me maybe, hopefully, a justifiable answer. And so my next question was, how do you justify voting against your constituents and against what you say you were against this budget deal last year, this omnibus bill? You said you were against it, but you stepped up and saved it. How do you justify giving Boehner and Obama exactly what they wanted against the wishes of your constituents? And his answer basically came down to, we can't afford to shut down the government. And he gave a number of false narratives. One is that the military people will not get paid, which if we have a spending gap, military pay is on that. But historically, what happens? Congress and the president get together and they say, hey, we gotta fix this, and they always do a stopgap funding bill to make sure our military people get paid. And so to say that, you know, we're going to be in big trouble and that they're not going to get paid, technically yes, but in reality no, that's not a problem. What we saw was Barack Obama using a lot of false narratives on how big a fiscal cliff it was if we run into a spending gap. And the Republicans, instead of fighting against that, really just played on it and said, hey, we've got to push this thing through. And so, all in all, the other thing he said that whenever we shut down the government, the Republicans always get blamed and it hurts the party. I wish I could ask follow-up questions on these town hall meetings, but they don't let you do that. Times we shut down the government. The last two times, Newt Gingrich, Newt Gingrich shut down the government with a standoff with Bill Clinton. What came out of that was this. The next election, we lost two House seats. We gained 2 Senate seats. That's the position we're in now. That's a golden trade. But you know what else came out of it? He wasn't just stopping the government to stop it. We had 4 years of balanced budgets come out of it. 4 years of balanced budget. He stopped it on principle, not just to be obstructionist, but on principle. And fighting for those principles, we got something out of that. And the people, some of them were upset. We lost 2 House seats, but they rewarded us in the Senate and gave us 2 Senate seats. The next time the government shut down was Ted Cruz filibustering in 2013. What happened after that? The next election
shut down the White House and nobody could come visit, and then
there was a lot of stuff that Obama did, a manufacturing crisis. He actually employed more people shutting down unstaffed monuments than it took to just leave them open. But Ted Cruz filibustering, shuts it down, I think it was 16 days. The next election, we get a historic majority in the House and take over the Senate. That's the kind of damage that happens when we shut down the government. And so, you know, he threw these things out there, and of course, I don't get to bring up those points. You just have to let it go. And then he shut down the meeting, and so I didn't get to ask any more questions. But coming out of that meeting, I had a few people come up to me and they said, some very good questions you were asking there, and have you ever thought about running? And I said, no. My goal in life was to live in the sticks, not move to Washington, D.C. And, but I shared that with my wife, and as we started talking about the state of things and where we were, in the fact that we've got representation that's really not representing us. What are you going to do? Will we forever sit back and say, I wish things were different? Or are we going to do something? And so we started praying about it. And really everything that I asked God for in prayer, He showed me. And we began to ask people in our circles, and they all resoundingly gave us encouragement to step out there and do this. And so I started reaching out, getting more counsel, and called some consultants up and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And the consultant looked at what we're talking on the phone. He didn't look at me, but he said on the other side of the phone, he goes, you realize it's more likely he's going to die in office than you're going to unseat him. And I said, well, I knew the odds were tough. Nobody quite worded it that way before, but I knew it was an uphill battle. And really, the last conversation my wife and I had about this, we were sitting down at our dinner table, and I told her, I said, nearly assured that we will lose this battle. But it's a fight that somebody needs to fight. Somebody's got to speak up for the truth. And so we filed and began to run. And as we began to run, I thought, how in the world am I going to explain to everybody else in my district what I see? Because most of it is obscured and it's hidden behind a bunch of show votes that make it look like he's voting much more conservative than he really does. How am I going to show this? And then he votes on the omnibus bill. And all of a sudden, I'm not having to go out there and look for people. They're calling me. They're saying, who are you? Because we're done with the representation we have.
Good.
They're tone deaf, and when that,
You paying attention.
and when that came around, for all the things I was afraid people weren't paying attention to, that bill right there was really what gave us traction in this race. What it comes down to is in D.C. you've got your conservatives, and there's not really enough of them. There's very few. You've got your liberals, and there's probably more of them than there are conservatives. But right down the middle, you've got Republicans and Democrats that are establishment. Their goal is for maximizing the government and the businesses that feed into it. And so you see that, and then all of a sudden the vote for the Trade Promotion Authority on TPP makes sense, because really the only people that make that benefits are the large corporations and the government. But small businesses, the individual consumer, just citizens in general, we're going to suffer under that. But you've got the Chamber of Commerce and all the lobbyists that it does benefit. And so when the Republicans and the Democrats in the center go for that, and you've only got conservatives and you've only got liberals that are voting against it, and actually there's more Democrats voting against it than there were Republicans. And the Democrats were right. They were concerned about labor. This is going to hurt jobs, and they're right. It will hurt jobs. You look at some of these things that go through, and you realize that the problem that we have is not Democrats. The problem that we have is not liberals or liberal thinking. It's that we have in Washington representatives that are interested not in us, but in themselves. And they work to their own ends, and when you try to approach them, you try and call them, you try and ask to get things done. I mean, for all the times I've called my representative's office, the only thing I've ever gotten back in the mail was a form letter, and every form letter that I got did not address the questions that I had. It might have been on the same topic, but it didn't say, okay, here's your concerns, and this is why we feel like that those are met. No, just completely ignored my concerns and just talked about what they wanted me to hear. And so we need people in Washington that are fighting for us, our values, and more importantly, fighting for our Constitution. Our Constitution is under assault. And you can almost look at you go through the Bill of Rights, you go through the Constitution, the separations of powers, and there's almost not a thing you can look at that hasn't been stepped on. And there's not really a voice out there in Washington saying, okay, there are a few, but there's not enough. Voices saying, let's get back in line with this document. This is where we're supposed to be. Because when they take that oath of office, they're not taking an oath to the United States of America. They don't take an oath to the president. They don't take an oath to represent their constituents. They take an oath to the Constitution of the United States.
Right.
And we need representation that is concerned with that. And we do not have that at all. I'm concerned for my children. The world they're going to grow up in. The United States they're going to inherit is not the one that I got. And they're saying on the internet now we've crossed over to $19 trillion in debt. Try to run some math on that real quick. $19 trillion. $1 bill is roughly 0.0043 inches. And if you stack those, I believe that comes out to 900,000 miles. Not end to end, flat on each other. The Earth is 25,000 miles around. Those are lots of dollars. The people that are voting to borrow that money have no concept and no concern. Because if they did, they wouldn't be doing it. They put an end to it. But we've added $1 trillion in the last year. While our representation is telling us about how much they're reducing our deficit or how much hard they're working to reduce that deficit, and it ain't happening. And if they were really dedicated to that cause, they'd send that budget to Obama and they'd sit on it and they'd wait till he decided to move. And all we hear from them is we can't afford to shut down the government. I mean, they don't get it. We can't afford to let it keep going.
Right.
We've got to change. We've got to change. We are very close to spending as much on our debt service as we do on our military. And that can't perpetuate. Our country will collapse on it. Greece, that's where we'll end up. Only it'll be worse because there's nobody that can bail us out. You've heard it too big to fail. The United States is too big to save. There is no group of countries that can come up with the money to save us and would be interested in it. And so we've got to make substantive changes, and it's going to take people that are interested in doing it, that are willing to get up there to fight and to speak out for what is right. And so that is why I'm running, and that is why I hope to have your vote. And if anybody's got questions, I'm happy to answer.
I see two other things that are severely lacking also, and that's the education of the people of what's happening in the country. They have no idea of, as evidenced by the young people voting for socialism. It's supposed to be a party type atmosphere where you get free education. They have no idea the whole ramification or anything about the Constitution. And the other thing is, number one, integrity is severely lacking in all areas.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Integrity is lacking in all areas, and we get a lot of misinformation coming out of Washington. One of the things that most people were upset about on that omnibus bill was they wanted to see Planned Parenthood defunded, and they didn't move on that. And And you get rhetoric from people out of Washington saying, well, that, I've actually had Mr. Edge and Flores both have said that Planned Parenthood did not get funded by that bill, when in fact it did. There's what they hide behind is the nuance that it's not named out because you don't have earmarks in this bill. What they do is they allocate it, and Health and Human Services says, okay, you get this much, you get. So what you would have to actually do is exclude Planned Parenthood from there to say they're not going to get funds. But there was funding in that bill that will be going to Planned Parenthood. And if somebody wants to say, well, Planned Parenthood wasn't funded by that bill, they can say that, but Planned Parenthood will get money from that bill. But Planned Parenthood gets money two ways. And what comes out of that bill is actually the lesser of the two. Most of it comes from Medicaid reimbursement. What elements of our party wanted to do was to eliminate Planned Parenthood from being able to receive funds from Title X, but also put a rider on the bill that would eliminate them being able to get Medicaid reimbursement. What leadership decided was this might be a fight with Obama, so they spurned the conservatives, but they still need more votes to get this bill passed, so they go to the Democrats. And when you hear people talking about they gave up too much to get this through, that's where when they went to go buy the votes off the Democrats because they didn't want to fight the fight for Planned Parenthood, that's where we lost it. That's where they went in and they gave away billions and tens of billions of dollars, $10 billion on green energy subsidies. Obama's refugee program, you know, I don't know of anybody, any reasonable person in America that's not worried about ISIS coming in on that refugee program. We've got presidential candidates on stage talking about we need to limit this till we know we can vet these people and know they're not ISIS. And our representatives did nothing to mitigate that. Right now, if you're watching TV ads or getting stuff in the mail, you're going to hear a lot of tough talk on national security. But 5 years in, we've not seen any action on that southern border from our Congress. And if they were serious about it, they could push it, but they're not. They'll only take it if it comes easy, and who knows if they take it yet. We've not seen that. But you know, you go on down, and there's something actually in that press release that I saw that it really kind of. I talked about the Planned Parenthood. It's also been said that the Green Climate Fund, Obama's Green Climate Fund, was not funded. Guess what's going to get $500 million from the United States government this year? Funded by that omnibus bill. It's not called out in there, but they diverted money through several different funds and banks, and that money will go to Obama's Green Climate Fund. Despite the fact that Flores put out a press release saying otherwise.
Can anybody tell me why he's not in prison or
Which one?
hanging from a rope?
Who?
The top man in the office.
Talking about Obama?
With all of his treasonous ass, why is he still
We
talking
still
damage
haven't
to
got
the
we still haven't got the head of the IRS or the old head of the IRS. You know, Hillary Clinton's running for office.
Attorney General.
We haven't got the Attorney General. You know, and so we've got a lot of people. We've got a lot of people in Washington D.C. that need to be held accountable, legally accountable, as in prison time.
Do you think they're working on a
But
plan
here's
and
one
it's all
of the
secret?
here's the thing. No, here's the thing. Whenever we won the House in 2010, John Boehner said, "We are not going to impeach Obama, and we are not going to allow the government shutdown." That's really the only two weapons you got, and they laid them down and walked away.
Mm.
And so, when they said that they're not going to hold Obama accountable directly, and they're not going to push a standoff with him financially, they really just handed it over to him, handed him all the reins and said, "Have your head," because all he has to do is push everything to the end of the budget year and he's going to get what he wants. There's no principled fortitude for conservative values up there. And there are people, there are some good people. Actually, we were talking earlier at the table. Bill Flores is not a person lacking influence. Very shortly after he got there, they put him in charge of a PAC, raising money for the House. Did a very good job for them. And his reward for that was that House leadership paved the way for him to be elected as chairman of the Republican Study Committee. As head of the Republican Study Committee, he's chairing, which is probably the largest caucus in the House. There's, I want to say, 170 members in it. There's only 240 something Republicans in the House, so the majority of Republicans are in this caucus, and he is chairing that. Now, when he ascended that role, whatever this says, there were a number of conservatives that split off and formed another caucus because they didn't. Basically, the word that was used was that Flores would be a shield for leadership. Basically saying he's just going to reflect whatever Boehner, now Ryan, would be looking for. And those were the words that were thrown out there. But Jim Jordan and a host of other guys split off and formed a separate caucus, the Freedom Caucus. And the Liberty Caucus said that since that time they've seen their roles grow, because the Republican Study Committee is no longer really taking those conservative ideals and pushing them forward, the liberty ideas and pushing them forward. And so we see all this happening, and really what it comes down to is one of two things. Is one, either the people of our district are happy with what they've got, they're not, or they don't know. And actually it's all three right now. There's a number of people that are unhappy with what they've got. And there's some that are okay with it. They like, I'm out there knocking on doors, and every once in a while I'll run into somebody, and they're like, they love Bill Flores, thinks he's the greatest thing, and what he's doing is just right. And and then there's others that I talk to them, and they just want to know what I think about the presidential race because they don't have a clue about anything else, and don't care. What is important to us, and how are we going to get that message out? Because we will only get the status quo if we keep voting for people that perpetuate the status quo. And it'll only be status quo for so long, because it's all going to come to a head. It won't go on like this forever. That was a very long answer for what you asked. Sorry.
Can I be real frank? If I were taking on your goals and aspirations, they're very honorable, but you're only one person, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that go into that cesspool and they can't change anything by themselves. How do you think, what plan of attack are you going to do differently? Am I the only one that thinks
No,
that?
it's one of 435 people. Okay, so one of 435. How do you make a difference as one of 435? And we flip two votes. We take one away from the establishment, we give one to the conservatives. But I would go in and I would basically find the people that are most like-minded with me and reach out. There are a lot of things that I'm concerned with that there are liberals that are concerned with. Just because somebody is a Democrat doesn't mean they're the enemy. I'm kind of like Ronald Reagan. We're all friends. It's just that the Democrats are wrong about some things. And so there are concerns that I've got that they share, and we can work together and make some of those things happen. But it really, so much happens under the fog of DC. And I think really being willing to put out the information, the reality of what is really going on, will make me very unpopular with the establishment. But it'll give people a chance to say, you know, this is what we're dealing with. And that's what our biggest problem right now is an uninformed electorate.
Mhm.
That's our biggest problem right
Well,
And people aren't using the Constitution either.
now. No.
It's like, excuse me, but that's not supposed to be that way according to the Constitution.
What percentage even knows what the Constitution says?
well, what to
If
me
you're in office, you
was
should know it, we better make sure they know it.
was a big
when we get there.
put on, and when they took over the House, when they all stood up there and read a sentence out of the Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
and then turned right around, and so many items they went against the Constitution.
Yep.
And that's what is so aggravating is the inactivity of the members of the House right now, because they could do more if they would take the initiative, because at least Mr. Boehner did one thing. He took the president to court on establishing the number of members that Mr. Obama wanted to take off of the FAC or FCC or something like that. And the courts told Mr. Obama he could not move those people off, and Mr. Boehner won. But that's the only time I've seen any activities out of the House going to the court. And what is you take the definition of an executive order. It is supposed to supplement if you need a law.
Mhm.
A law has been passed, and you supplement that law. That's what has not been happening.
Oh,
No,
not more.
and the membership, the leadership, does nothing but sit there. And for example, this omnibus bill, Mr. Boehner left, and Mr. Ryan, Paul Ryan came in, and his first statement was the cake's already been made. The cake's already been baked. Well, since he was elected speaker, he could do many things if he wanted to. But he did not want to do it, and he let it go, but he used a lame excuse. And that what the Republican base is upset of the inactivity of the people that we have elected to go to Washington, D.C. and to work. They have actually forgotten about us.
Do you think they're being threatened by the president in some way, just like the Supreme Court? I can't believe some of the opinions that have come out of there, and trying to make laws from the court. That's not their position,
Well,
according to the Constitution.
any elected official looks for two things. One is to be reelected. Number two is to be on a committee. That's what they're looking for. And they're going to take care of that first before they do anything else. And we had a prior congressman would feast on the Republicans in this district until finally it was changed. But it seems like when people, in my opinion, there's been other people other than Mr. Flores to go up there and succumb to the leadership for promises to move up the ladder. And that's the way it's handled. And to be an individual psychologically wants to be included. You want to be a member of something. You don't want to be on the outside, so you will succumb to move a little bit this way if your constituency isn't looking. And unfortunately, we have a lot of constituency that is not looking. And like I said, my family, some of my family aren't looking. And trying to get through, and I've had many discussions, many emails with Jeff, Chief of Staff, back and forth. Jeff's been real good answering my questions, but it still doesn't solve the problem. My big thing on this omnibus bill was our representatives giving the president the authority to bring 10,000 Syrian refugees into this country without being vetted. And they can't be vetted.
And to that point, the problem isn't that they're not trying to vet them, it's that there's no intelligence to back it up with. And so there's processes in place to vet refugees, but since we don't have any intelligence on it, we don't know. And we're bringing people in that most likely, some of them will be ISIS sympathizers. And because we do know from intelligence that they're looking to exploit that.
And we have quite a few already here for quite a
Oh,
while.
yeah.
But see, another thing,
80% of the mosques are hostile toward us living here.
And since Abbott was speaking out against it, they're bringing as many to Texas as they can.
Well, I tell you what,
it-
Abby, I'll be standing right there with him with my gun.
what's another thing is AIDS is going crazy, and they're gonna be bringing it into the United States. Secondly, you see how many,
Not just AIDS. All kinds of
secondly,
things.
you see how many women are being raped.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you know that the women other than Muslims are considered infidels?
Mhm.
And their imams and everything says there's nothing wrong with that. And Norway had to hold classes for those people to tell them that wasn't the thing to do. Now, why are we being forced to 10,000, and that's only the start?
And so you'll hear too, people will say, well, you know, Canada's brought some in and France is bringing in refugees. We hear about the Sunnis and, you know,
They're
all
not
these,
bringing them in, they're getting bombarded by them just coming in.
they're,
We're bringing them in.
we hear about a couple of different factions of Islam. And there's actually far, far more than what you hear about. And the Canadian government, they went out and they brought in as refugees a group of Muslims. But they're from a sect, I can't pronounce the name. The lady that was telling me about it was actually from the area. I don't know if it was her accent or just my Texas tongue, but I couldn't master it. She was telling me the name of it. She said, but they part of their religious beliefs is they swear off all violence. You know, they might as well be like Mennonites or something.
Mhm.
And so whenever somebody brings up, you know, well, so-and-so's doing this, well, not always the same. Not always the same thing. And we're not being so careful in choosing who it is that we bring over. And it's troublesome. And what's more troublesome is that, you know, we had an opportunity to do something with that, and it just got skipped over.
Not only that, is their laws are being made decisions by in our court system. I mean, they're judging cases by Sharia law.
They are.
And
Yeah.
and as a country that, you know, like I said, we just
Dallas,
borrowed $1 trillion
Texas,
over the
yeah.
last year. And yet, we're bringing these refugees in. We're not just dropping them off at the street corner. We're setting them up in housing. We're giving them money every month and giving them health care and all these different resources. And so, it's,
Social Security.
My son
It's
just
like a
went to
never-ending
Minnesota
story.
to visit his in-laws.
yeah,
They went to Walmart, and he says about 90% of the women in there were Muslim.
Wearing the
had
hijab.
Yeah, hijab.
there's places in Minnesota and Michigan that the communities are vast majority, nearly 100% Muslim. And so we, as a part of our Constitution, it has been stated that, you know, we offer the freedom to worship as you choose. And so I don't really step out there and condemn people because they choose to believe differently than I do.
But you condemn them if
But-
they're.
but if
they
they-
can
Tell
sense to
you
kill
instead-
you
But-
because
Their
you don't
freedoms.
believe in it.
But my point of
That's
view
a
is
rare life,
that
it's not just a rare.
if you elect me, your representative, my first obligation in my duties as representative is one to the Constitution, and as that, providing for the common defense of the states. And in that, not doing what they did in December, where they just totally left, like I said, the southern border, nothing done on that, nothing done on the refugees. They did a little bit on the visas, but they really didn't fix the problem, because the problem was more diligence than it was regulation. And so we need changes. We need changes.
Well, I have
Doesn't
one
mean
thing.
the correct thing.
Well, I have more than one thing that I would like to see changed.
Yes, I agree with you.
Three things?
No,
Yes.
one is baseline budget.
Yes.
This has got to be changed, and the Republicans have been out of control of the presidency and both
Yeah.
houses, and have never changed that damn thing.
Now, y'all may know this, I'm gonna cover it real quick, just because everybody needs to know this. Discretionary spending across the board needs to be baseline, start from zero on everything. Non-discretionary spending. A lot of times you'll hear lawmakers throw that around and they use it as if there's nothing we can do with that, you can't change it, it's non-discretionary, that's the meaning of the word. And that's not true. That's not true at all. What non-discretionary means is, with discretionary, we say we're gonna spend $500, and that's what we've got to spend. And knowing our government, they'll spend every penny. With non-discretionary, what it says is that for the people that we deem needed, we're gonna give them $500. Well, how many people do you deem is gonna need it? Well, if we're talking about Social Security, some people leave the system during the year, others come into the system during the year. How much are we gonna spend? We don't know. It's dictated by the legislation. Well, how do we change that? The same way they changed it every other time. You change the laws and you change the variables inside the legislation so that, you know what, you want to come into the system, you can't do that until you're 2 years further along. Or when you come in at this age, you're only going to get this percentage instead of that other percentage. And so there's things that they can do to change that. It's legislative, but it's more variable than it is a fixed
You're
number.
talking about Social Security.
Yes, sir.
Well, they gotta go back when LBJ got Congress to open the door and let them go in and get all they want for IOUs.
Right.
And it didn't stop with LBJ because they did it again this last year.
Right.
They dipped in and
Not only that, but there's one time in the transportation bill, Senator McConnell was going over to Social Security, grabbing a bunch of money to go into Social, and it was the Democrats that stopped him.
And then the Supreme Court said we do not have a law that said you have to get what they've taken from you without a choice.
And yeah, what they've done with Social Security is nothing short of theft,
That's right.
and it's put us in a very bad way financially as a country, because it's one more thing that's out there that we have to cut, because we promised this money. So people ask me, and y'all didn't ask me, and I'm gonna throw it out there anyway because I feel like it's part of it. But on Social Security, our entitlement programs are gonna have to come down. We're gonna have to get people off the welfare system.
Good.
It has happened before.
Yeah.
We did it in the 90s, that part of that deal with the contract with America. They got welfare reform and they moved people off the rolls and into the workforce.
Right.
That's why people like Bernie Sanders, everything's free,
Now,
but he doesn't say where it comes from.
I've heard this before. I know all of you have heard it before. I'm going to repeat it because it bears repeating. When they started out the raw deal back in the 40s, the New Deal, they said, when you get to X age, we're gonna provide you benefits. And really, at that period of time, people that, if you lived that long, because it wasn't necessarily a given, if you lived that long, then you started getting benefits, and you likely weren't able to work at that age anymore. Our standard of living has raised a little bit since the 40s. And we're at a place now where, you know, it's expected you're gonna live till 80. But people still want to start drawing benefits 15, 20 years before their life expectancy instead of at about where their life expectancy was. Couple that with a thieving Congress that keep dipping into the kitty and taking your money, and we've got a huge gap between what we can provide and what we said we will. And I think what my generation is going to have to do is stand up and say everybody that was born after such and such date is just going to have to do for themselves. But we're all going to have to keep paying into the system so that we can take care of those who are depending on it. And that's really, I say that some of the younger groups, they say, well, that's not fair. And I'm like, well, you're right, but we have to deal with this with the hand dealt us. We don't get to choose what's the easy road, what's the, you know, the right thing to do is to make good on the obligations to the people that really just can't correct for the mismanagement in Congress.
We need to do
I
something.
enjoyed, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We need to do something to change all these people, these 40-year-olds that are getting a good lawyer and getting on the SSI.
Right.
Since Obama took office, there's been an explosion in the disability insurance, and that's actually what they stole the money from Social Security this last fall, so that they can pay into an underfunded Social Security disability.
Well, why can't they revoke the law, and if you go back to the way it was before? There's only one presidential candidate that had the answer. That was Al Gore, a lockbox. Remember?
Lockbox.
Right.
And really what we need to do is, and this, I was answering a survey from a group that's concerned with toll roads, and answering their questions, and I said, you know, really what we need to do is get the federal government out of the road building business.
Right.
Because when it comes to taking taxes and then implementing those into a project, they're totally irresponsible and you can't trust them. They'll take that money that's supposed to be for roads and spend it on something else.
Right.
And then when they're building a road, they'll spend infinitely more money trying to make it beautiful.
Ask Senator Corker.
And, you know, and that's true about a lot of things, including our welfare system. There are states that take care of their health care of their citizens. We don't need a federal government to try and come in behind and do those things. And so if the great state of Nebraska decides that everybody needs to be taken care of healthcare wise, let them do it. And let Texas remain on a live and let live policy, you know, and go on with our liberty.
You don't work, you don't eat.
If they would have voted for George Bush's plan to privatize the younger people, they would have been much better off by now. with
Yeah,
that
looking
plan.
back at me on the military retirement, if they'd have put us on instead of giving us free Social Security at first, then about 10 years later, they said, oh, we can't do that, we need no more money. No, we're gonna go back and collect that 10 years.
Did they really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I was in it, you know, I was in a change of conversion from a serial number to a Social Security number. And then they said, you're gonna get free Social Security, you're gonna get your quarter that you got. And then 10 years later, they called us in and said, no, we need more money.
Well, that's
So
true,
they
they did,
made us
because
they made us pay back our Social Security.
you all know it's being taxed twice, when you make it and when you take it out.
Right.
Right.
Do you know that?
well, on the Social Security, technically not, but
It is.
you're,
I pay
Now for-
taxes on it
and this
twice.
is, whenever, if anybody talks to you about the trade, doing the trade agreements with other nations, this is a beef that I've got and a lot of conservatives, and a lot of liberals, and people across the board have these concerns. And that is that we don't get to do fair trade. In our country, we have barriers, financial barriers set up by our government that put us at a disadvantage
Mhm.
when it comes to producing products and shipping them overseas. And one of, for instance, how many countries institute a FICA tax. Because as a company, you know, if I'm paying somebody $10 an hour, $20 an hour, they gotta pay into FICA, I have to pay into FICA. I have to pay insurance. I have to pay insurance on my business, on the things that we do, but then I have to pay healthcare insurance, or I have to pay a fine.
Mhm.
And, you know, and you start adding up, you know, you start looking at regulations, you know, if you're under the EPA or some of these other regulatory agencies, you know, meeting their regulations are not what other countries have to do. And you go on down the line, and there are a lot of costs built into just trying to do business in the United States. Whereas you open up free trade with some of these other nations, they don't have those hurdles, those obstacles. And so anybody that tries to push a free trade agreement right now needs to be pressed to iron out our obstacles first before they decide to open up for more competition, because we're not playing on a level field. We're not playing on a level field at all.
I think Donald Trump has a real good handle on that as a businessman, his perspective on trade.
Donald Trump did a lot for the conversation in the presidential race.
Yes.
He did a whole lot for it. Bringing up and just pounding it, well, him getting up and jumping up and down about the southern border,
Yeah.
because our government could care less. I don't get it, why they don't understand it.
It was
But they
passed
don't-
in
they don't
what,
even try.
in the 80s or 90s already, and that money was stolen. It was
Oh,
never
yeah.
used for the border.
And so we've got, right now, you know, I don't know if you know any DPS officers, but DPS officers are rotation down to the border. And so they leave their families and they go down there on their rotation and try and make up the difference where our federal government is failing its constitutional duty
Right.
to provide the common defense. And so,
Yeah, but our government is the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate.
exactly.
Supposedly.
And so this is where
I call
This is
Mayor
where we,
Rankin
the
was a
people,
Democrat.
need to realize that we can't be lazy and vote for a letter.
That's right.
We can't vote for a letter. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are really mad. When I told you, after that omnibus vote, I had people calling me. I had several of them telling me that I better beat Flores, because if I didn't, they were going to vote for the Democrat. I said, I don't know if you want to do that. Which I've met the Democrat guy. He's a nice guy. Bill Mott is his name. But we can't vote for letters. We just can't do it. You know, and the Republican Party has a hard time with that. They think that, you know, you need to stay on Republican regardless. But we've got a problem if we just keep voting for people just because they have an R behind their name. We're not going to get to where we need to be, and you know, we're running a shorter track than we used to. Just saying.
I know Don's been very hot and heavy on that, vetting people in this state, because they go through, all you have to do is say they want to run for something, and then, oh, okay, go ahead. Nobody vets them at all.
Yes, sir.
First of all, you're with Brazos County also, right? It's in your district?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm an implant from Brazos Valley.
Okay.
Brazos County, so I'm just here because my friend asked me to come. But I heard what you said about, I think, you know, the attorney was telling you that Bill Flores, to beat him, he's gonna die in office and it'll be an uphill battle, right? Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah. He said it. Well, he was talking statistically over the course of our nation.
Right, okay.
It's more likely that a congressman will die in office than they will be unseated by a
Okay.
challenger.
Well, I want to give you some words of encouragement.
Okay.
I don't know you, first time I met you. If everything you say tonight is true, I like what I hear, okay? But I'll say this, that's what they said about Chet Edwards, okay?
Yep.
Before Bill Flores took. Several years ago, because I was employed at another employer, I had the opportunity to do the music, to play a trumpet for the Brazos Valley, the Chamber of Commerce, their annual dinner. And one of those dinners, about 10 years ago, I sat at the table with Chet Edwards, and I was talking to him. And my own personal opinion, I don't know, but it seems like now that Chet Edwards would have been more conservative in his voting than Bill Flores is. I don't know. I don't
No,
know.
he wouldn't
I
have
don't
been.
know that well, but what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, I wanna give you words of encouragement because everybody thought that he was unbeatable. I'm hearing a lot of talk tonight about all the bad things, and I agree, there's a whole lot of bad things going on in our nation. But like I tell my kids, we don't watch the news because I want our kids to focus on the positives out there, not the
Yeah.
negatives, okay? And my positive for you is, the American people aren't as dumb as what we think they are, okay? We proved that in the 2012 midterms, the 2010 and the 2014. The tide was turned. The only reason that Chet Edwards got voted out and Bill Flores would come in, because they were voting the D or the R. The American people were trying to get out of. So if the American people are that smart, they're going to put in someone who they trust, and they don't. If his voting record is not what we agree with, they're going to vote him out. So everybody thought that Chet Edwards was unbeatable. Okay, the trend is turning. The tide is turning. The American people are on the right track as a whole. We've seen our government. Ted Cruz is making a firm stand against the grain. He's going to swim upstream, but he's not backing down. And if you're that same caliber, I believe that you have a fighting chance to beat Bill Flores. Okay, I just want to encourage you,
I
because
appreciate
people
that.
see through all of this stuff, and they're voting out the guys who don't belong there.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so-
appreciate that. Yeah, without his omnibus vote, I'm probably not even where it close. But when that happened, that really opened the door for me.
Sure.
And I've gotten a lot of traction off of that. And I usually set my expectations low. It's typical politics, but I set the expectations low. We're getting a lot of traction out there. Now, Flores probably has more in his spare change in his couch than I've got in my campaign. I don't do any polling. There's been polling done on his behalf. I don't know if it was him or a PAC that was doing it. They were calling around mispronouncing my name. I'm sure that was purely on accident. Since I started getting phone calls from people saying, hey, he's doing polling and they're mispronouncing your name, then I started hearing from a lot of people around the district saying, we hadn't heard from Flores in 6 years, but hey, he's here now. And I said, funny how that happened. And
Just over the top.
Okay.
Seriously.
I-
I've held my tongue up to this point. The fact that I hadn't seen him in 6 years. You know
Their
how
words,
often-
not mine.
You know how often he comes to the district? Every single weekend.
he lives in the district.
Yes, he does. He comes home every weekend, and he works Fridays, he works Mondays, every single, what can I say? Let you have your time. I sat here and listened to your characterization of that town hall meeting. I was there. You put a lot
Okay,
of-
let me
You put a lot
explain
of
this.
stake in principles.
In
Truth is a principle.
January 5th, we had a candidate forum in Franklin, Texas. Mr. Edge will remember this, he was there. It was a candidate forum, it wasn't a standard meeting. It was actually called a candidate forum. We all come in, there's, all the local candidates are there. There's, I think, 14 candidates in all. And they call us in and they say, okay, candidates, if you will, sit on the first 2 rows. And so we all come up there and we sit down on the first 2 rows. And then we pass a bucket and everybody pulls a number out of the bucket. This tells you what order you will speak in. I got first out of the people in my race, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And so you get like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I forgot what it was. Ralph Patterson was the other guy right behind me, and he told me I went over a little bit. But in trying to be brief, I just mentioned who I was and a few things that I was disappointed in. One of them was the Planned Parenthood vote on the omnibus bill, the omnibus vote that funded Planned Parenthood. I've already explained to you how Planned Parenthood gets funded through that bill. After that, James got up behind me, and in the most condescending manner he could, he spoke down to me. He actually stood down, he leaned over like this, and he spoke down to me and told that whole crowd that I didn't know what I was talking about, that Planned Parenthood did not fund that bill. That bill did not fund Planned
It's a
Parenthood.
fact.
And I didn't know how Planned Parenthood got funded, and if I did, then I wouldn't have said that. Now, I've just explained to you how Planned Parenthood is funded. It will receive funds from that bill. He proceeded his comments by saying that I'm here on official capacity, so I'm not here to campaign. But then he proceeded to speak. The reason he said that is because in his official capacity, he's not allowed to campaign for Bill Flores. He got up to speak in turn with 14 candidates. The rules don't always apply to some people.
You know.
And so you have a problem with
Hey,
the
I'm a
truth.
constituent here, son. I'm a constituent here.
And a
I
very
have
hostile one.
I have a right to ask questions here just like everyone
Then
else.
ask one.
Well, I was at the town hall meeting
Okay,
in Groesbeck.
go ahead.
You have mischaracterized completely how that town hall meeting.
Instead of saying I mischaracterized it, go ahead and correct. What
You
think was
asked
wrong.
one question.
I asked two.
You timidly asked, no, you just told us you had 6.
I had 6.
Yeah, no,
I didn't
you
get
just
to ask
told us a
six.
series of questions that you asked.
I
You
I
didn't
went
ask
to
those
two.
questions, Caleb.
I did ask
No,
two.
you did not. You asked one question about purse strings. That was what, we had a whole staff there.
Okay.
You talk about everything from Planned Parenthood, you talk about TPA. You don't seem to know the difference between TPA and TPP.
I do
You
know the
characterize-
difference.
No, well, if you do, you know that TPP has not even been voted on yet. It may not ever be voted.
What was TPA about?
TPA was Trade Promotional Authority.
On.
Republicans believe
On.
in free trade.
On.
Do you believe in free trade, Caleb?
I believe in fair trade, yes. Sir.
Okay, that's right. Well, that's what TPA was about.
Were you here for the fair
But
trade
also,
portion?
3 other countries would be able to tell the United States, if that were passed, what, give
No, no.
them,
No, you're confusing
Correction.
TPA with TPP.
Okay, here's this is
Social
where
Security, Caleb.
attorneys like to do this a lot. They do it a lot in Washington DC too. They like to draw distinctions, and in their distinctions, just kind of ignore where things kind of come together. And so TPA, Trade Promotion Authority, gave Obama the authority to negotiate Trans-Pacific Partnership without interference from Congress or the Senate. Otherwise, you'd have 635 people, 536 people trying to negotiate this thing. And so, whenever you think of that many people having a word in it, you can see why TPA is a thing. But what they do is what this does is TPA says, I vote for this, Obama gets to negotiate on it, and we get no input. It comes up for a vote, and we vote up or down. That's how it goes. Now, what your congressman probably will not tell you about TPA, previously called Fast Track, I believe is what they called it before. But since Fast Track's inception, through TPA's inception, every time the president has been given Fast Track or Trade Promotion Authority, it passes. Because Congress can't change it, so their choice is to take it or leave it, and they always take it. If TPP goes through, it'll be the first time that one of those bills has been voted down.
Well, let me ask you this. Anytime that the United States makes an agreement with another country, what is that called? It's called a treaty, isn't it?
Yes.
And what is the Constitution says that you should do if that's a treaty?
has to be passed by Congress. Right?
Passed by the Senate. And the man just run over it, and the leadership is just set on their behind and not done a bloody thing. And to make the senators go down into a cellar, and the representatives go down in the cellar and read that and can't have a pencil or a piece of paper to make notes.
That's illegal, right in a.
That's
in and of
stupidity
itself.
for the leadership to sit there and accept that.
Right,
And they wonder why the American people are upset.
right.
Is because our leadership and the majority of those are sitting on their behind, letting him get away with everything, and they put them in control of the Senate and the House to stop that. They won't. They had the strings of the purses to do it if they wanted to, but our elected officials sit there on their behind and not do a thing.
Don, let me address something real quick. You're talking about TPP, this trade agreement that is for the most part finalized now. Mr. Sims over here, he was right. If Congress had, he's got such contempt for Congress, yet he evidently wants Congress micromanaging trade deals. The fact is, if you had 435 members of the House going there every day and changing things, there would be no way you could ever negotiate any trade agreement at all. You would have people leaking information to the press. It's a system that since the advent of time, these trade agreements have been negotiated in secret. You can't negotiate a trade agreement on the internet because you're dealing with dozens of different countries in some cases. This is not something where they're attempting, I mean, we have to be honest with one another.
Yeah, but-
I've been coming to you guys for many, many months, many years, and being honest with you.
Okay,
And the
but-
fact is, you've got to, when you're doing something like a trade agreement, if you're negotiating with, let's say, Japan, you're negotiating with Korea, you're negotiating with these other Pacific countries, if you, in a public way, if you telegraph what you're doing, what you're intending to do, you're gonna upset this person, or this country, or that country. So when the agreement is finally finished, Congress is going to have an opportunity to vote on it. Congress is going to read every word of it.
But James,
I don't know why this
It's
is,
like Obamacare, yeah, right.
James,
James?
They didn't read it.
keep in mind, Obamacare was passed when the president had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. There wasn't a single Republican vote for
yeah.
Obamacare,
right.
so.
But when you have secrets that beget secrets that beget more
Well, what are you
secrets
talking
and
about
more,
now?
anything, if you let this get away, because it is a treaty under
Well,
our
a trade
Constitution.
agreement is not a treaty.
And
If you make agreement with another country, the United States enters into an agreement with
It's-
another country.
It's semantics, Don. Trade agreements are not treaties. You're not going to, it doesn't matter if it is or not, you're still going to ultimately have to have that ratified through Congress. And frankly, TPP may not even come up, to be honest with
Okay,
now here's the thing. With TPP, it's not just a trade agreement. If 5,554 pages, excuse me, it's not just a trade agreement. It does a whole host of things that have nothing to do with trade. And that's what gets left out. You've got that many pages, 20 some odd chapters in this thing. And your typical trade agreement would just be a few chapters. And so there are a lot of things that go on in this thing, a lot of moving parts that are built to benefit intellectual property, extension of pharmaceutical patents, things that typically would benefit your big pharma, your big Hollywood, and all these other. There's a lot of pork in there for those guys. Like I said, if you're a small manufacturer, you're hurt. You're in a world of hurt because you're going to be put up against countries that have very low wages, low barriers to entry on their business models, and right now, I mean, if you want to ship something, it doesn't cost hardly anything. And so we would be competing with very, very cheap labor overseas. It's when they say, "Do you believe in free trade?" They make it sound like all of a sudden, you're wanting to close the doors, and it's not about that. It's about, we've already seen what happened with NAFTA and how many jobs we lost over that. And so let's double down on that and open it up to the Pacific Rim. And we really, at this point, Obama made a State of the Union address. I don't know how many of you wasted your time on that one. But he talked about 5% unemployment, down from 10% unemployment at one point. During that period, from when we went from 10% down to 5%, the number of people in the workforce shrank by 2.5%.
62% are working.
Yeah, it was closer to 65, 66,
5 to 62 on computer.
and now it's down to like 62.5% of people in the workforce. And so we've actually got fewer people working, even though they're quoting lower unemployment numbers. We have a jobs problem in our nation. Now, part of it's jobs problem, part of it's because we allow them to ride. What should be a safety net has become a hammy, and we allow that. But we are not in a position where we need more labor, and we're not in a position where we need more competition. But yeah, we're opening the door for more labor to come in, we're opening the door for more competition from overseas, and it's only gonna hurt our economy if we do that with the way that our laws are set up right now.
Let me ask another question. How many parts of the budget is there?
How many parts of the budget are
Yeah,
there?
I mean, there's 10 submitted, there's 5 submitted, there's 6, because it's always on the 30th of September, and nobody has their budget in.
What's supposed to be done is the executive, the president, is supposed to provide a budget to Congress. I'm thinking it's like, it's in February sometime. There's a legal date. Obama's never met that date once, which is why I forget, because we haven't had to worry about it. But what's supposed to happen, he's supposed to deliver to Congress, okay, this is the money we need appropriated for what we're doing. And he hasn't done that. Now, Congress has put forward some budgets.
I think it.
And even I want to say it was last year, they passed one out of the House that was it wasn't gonna balance the budget. It was projected to balance the budget in like 9 or 10 years. And then this year, I think they actually passed one in the House that was supposed to be balanced, but it never got to the Senate, through the Senate.
See, that really infuriates me, that the Congress sits there, the House, the Senate sits over there, and you gotta get to 60 votes in order to move something, because they can stop it. So consequently, they stop all budgets until it gets down there to the 30th of September. And then, here comes the pork. They throw more pork in those budgets, and the Republicans say, well, we can't do it because the Senate won't do it, because the Senate's gotta get 60 votes.
And there's all kinds of people calling for an Article 5 constitutional convention, so we can rein that in.
Well,
That's a bad idea.
yeah, well, see, but our governor's gonna ask the state legislature to approve.
Well, what we need to do, and contact your governor and tell him don't do this, but what we need to do is we need to vote out the people that allow that stuff to happen up in DC and change it through regular, with the way it should be
I know what
done.
they should do. They should penalize every senator and representative if they don't get it out by 2 months, 10% of their pay. They don't get it out in 20 months, in 5th month, charge them 30% of their pay. And I'll bet you $1 to a donut they'll get it out fast then.
They,
You know, because that won't happen, but they need to be penalized to get this stuff out.
well, the best way to penalize them is just vote them out.
Just vote them out. It's flat aggravating
It is.
to see the budget and then see more pork thrown into it.
It is.
And that.
Judy, you were gonna ask.
Well, let's wind it up.
Judy had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question too. What frustrates me with all these trade agreements is we're losing our sovereignty, that we're open for lawsuits. I know the country board's been labeling on our meat now, Canada and Mexico, they're suing us. We just get further and further away. And
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, because I think it's probably big business that's wanting to do all these foreign trade agreements.
And quite frankly, big business owns the government right now. And what you end up with is they go up there and they have these breakfasts and they have these meetings, and the lobbyists come in and they say, okay, here's your max contribution from me, and we're gonna get this, and they go down the line. And you end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars in max contributions coming out of the DC area, Virginia around there, Maryland right there close. And when you've got that kind of grip, because when you come back, go down the street and ask regular, Tom or Joe, hey, I need a contribution, and here's a $30 check. Who are they listening to? The guy writing $2,700 checks.
Oh, yeah.
And mostly because we talked about it here, the general electorate doesn't pay attention. And the most of what they know, and this was true of me, the most of what I knew before I started paying attention, I liked my guy that I was voting for. Because everything I knew about him was he was a great conservative vote in Washington and really fighting for my principles.
And
Until
how
I
do
started
you
paying
find
attention.
out about how they do it through the Heritage?
You can go to Heritage, you can go to Conservative Review, in places like that. When I started watching the votes myself, I was on the House. I can't remember what it's called now. There in the House website, there's a particular place you can go and they list out every single vote. But if you want to know, you can't tell just by reading what those votes are, because they don't name them what they are. And so you kind of have to be watching it as it happens if you, or have some way to tie back to it to find a particular vote you're looking for. But whenever I said I was watching the procedural vote when Flores voted for that budget, I was watching that on the House website.
Okay.
What was your question?
Oh.
Better get it in.
You just messed up.
Too fast.
Just follow.
What is your stand toward Israel in all respects?
In all respects, they are an ally that deserves our unwavering support.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I do not. Second Amendment. I like it.
It's just,
Let me, excuse me, I'm sorry. On the Second Amendment, one of the things that I think most people miss is the Second Amendment does not give us the right to keep and bear arms. What the Second Amendment does is it acknowledges, it presumes that right. It says that the government may not infringe on it. And so when you go back to the Declaration, they say these creator endowed rights, which include life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, they're holding out that the right to keep and bear arms is a God-given right that we have, and the federal government may not infringe on that at all. So the ATF and all the laws that they enforce are unconstitutional, according to the Second Amendment. So that's my take on it. I don't think that, I joke around sometimes. I say, if my sweet little old lady that lives next to me wants to buy a tank, the Second Amendment says yes, and hopefully she'll let me drive it. But the reality is it does say that a militia, it allows for the militias to be well trained, and so that really opens the door that the states can regulate the firearms at some level, but it leaves no room for the federal government to.
I like a lot of people, and I didn't know at first when I came in, is delete the 17th Amendment.
Yes. That would be where we elect senators instead of the state governments appointing them.
That would be one of the best things that ever happened.
With our current state government, it would not be as advantageous for us, but that's the right way to do it. And it's supposed to be that the Senate is to be there to look out for the state government's rights, or not rights, but state government's, what they need to get taken care of. And so that's one that needs to go.
But it seems, I've been told the state government will sit there and not do anything because there's a lot of money flowing in from the federal government that they don't want to lose.
Yeah.
So they won't take the steps like to stop anything because they're on the tip too.
Yeah.
And
But then they're told how to do it, instead of raising it from home and using it.
anyway, if does anybody have anything else, we'll, call it.
To me, the drug deal is a big problem.
As far as the illegal drugs.
Do we legalize it? What do we do to change that? I mean, the big thing is to get the border closed so it's not coming across, but.
Close the border, that's not gonna stop it. You know, the reality is if there's buyers, somebody's gonna be a seller. And so, regardless of what it is, you outlaw it, you're gonna have to be willing to take steps to stop it. And those steps, that'll never go away.
I've been talking to our local candidates, so what are you gonna do to just change it?
And-
Because that's where it's gonna start.
You know, really, people say, I wanna see the border secure. People say, well, what is your plan for it? It's not my plan. We have people that work on that are much smarter than me about, okay, this area of Texas, we need this part of Arizona, we need that. And I would leave it to those people to say, okay, that's how we need to get it done. From my position, what I say is, you know, for the 17th district, we wanna make sure this happens. What is it gonna take? You know, let's make it happen. Because one of the first orders of business of this country, providing for the common defense, we need to get that done. Once we get that border secured, it's gonna slow down the flow of drugs, but it's not gonna stop. You know, if it gets to where they can't bring them across the border, they'll be making them here.
Like meth, that's the problem.
That's a huge problem, you know, and you can make that in your house. So it's, how do you stop that? Especially when you've got TV shows showing you how to do it.
There's more drugs in prison than there are out here on the streets.
I appreciate you all coming out. Thank you for coming over. Thank you, Seth, for inviting him to come over.
I invited several.
Thank you for coming back. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Hope you come.
He told me there's gonna be a steak dinner, that's why.
Oh, I thought you did.
I appreciate it.
You got here too late.
Too late.
We'd already eaten the steaks.
We already closed the barbecue grill down.
I appreciate y'all allowing me to.
But if y'all would like some of these signs, we have some yard signs over here. Or if you know of any other places to place signs, Chris and her husband's put up 3 signs. Billy and AJ's put up 2 big signs on 3058.
How much?
So he said as many as you can put up.
Okay.
But if you'd like to get some signs, please get some signs to take with you. Don't forget, we're gonna start voting early, 16th of February. Vote early.
And if you will, reach out to your friends and suggest. If there's somebody that you really believe in, reach out to you, because there's a lot of people that just aren't, they don't know, they don't follow.
It's like 45% in Iowa didn't know who they were voting until they got into the booth.
Right.
Right there is the website, KalebSims.com. KalebSims.com. Go to it, he's got a good website. He gives you all those things, what he stands for, what he wants to do. And particularly, he and Matt been working the devil out of Bryan College Station, putting some signs up. If you have anybody over there that would like to get a hold of him through that website or any and ask him to put up some signs for him, we'd appreciate it very much.
Have you met Pat Brazel?
Yes.
Did you ever
They
go
said
in?
last week.
We're going to,
I didn't know.
and we've got a tea party thing going.
I had kidney stones, so I wasn't gonna make it.
Are you gonna speak there? See you again.
And thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I guess that's it. We'd like to invite you back the first Tuesday of every month, right here. You would bring some people with you. It'll always be some interesting conversation.
This election, very.
For a stimulating conversation.